back to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club where we play games and brew good conversation together. My name is Jenny.
And I'm Joel.
We have, I don't know what we have, finger guns?
We have finger guns.
Finger guns are out. We're ready.
Got magic karate chops happening.
Yeah. And no, this is not an anime, although we will, Mr. Saitou, the game we're playing is it feels very much like a slice of life mixed with fantasy anime.
Totally.
I feel like it's got the vibe. Today, we are going to be continuing our deeper dive into Mr. Saitou by chatting with the developer, Laura Shigihara.
Laura was super wonderful, especially if you are looking for a little slice of joy today. I think you're really going to enjoy listening to this. She does such a great job of not only giving us the behind the scenes of the game, but helping us reconnect to some of the joy that's easy to leave behind along the way to adulthood. So definitely, if you're looking for a little pick-me-up, this is going to be a great interview today.
Yep. And as always, if you are new to the broadcast, to this podcast, welcome. You can find out more information about Geeks and Grounds and how we organize the club at the website geeksandgrounds.com. And if you are a returning member of this game club, we would love to hear from you from the platform you're listening on, whether it's by leaving a iPod? Yeah.
Yeah, iPod
Apple,
for sure. It's definitely
iPod. The Apple Podcast review, Spotify ratings, or YouTube comment. We just love to hear from you, and it helps us, handle the whole algorithm deal.
Get the word out, baby.
Yes. So I think that's it. Ready to hop in?
Let's hop in.
Here we go. Thank you so much for joining us today, Laura. How's your day going?
Going pretty good. I watched Alone, the survival show.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. How did that go?
It was good. I don't watch a lot of reality TV, but for some reason I got into it. I think it's because it's so opposite from what I do for a living that it's a nice departure, to kind of just go watch people surviving in nature. And I don't know, it's a very insightful kind of quiet reality show. So it makes me want to hike and do outdoor stuff.
I love that. I feel like for me, it takes my stress levels up 10 degrees. Oh my gosh, if I were ever in a situation, I would not make it. I'm glad you find it inspiring.
Yeah, I don't know outdoor skills or anything like that. I wish I did, but I would be the first to go.
I feel like the outdoor skills that I like are the kinds from Laid Back Camp. I don't know if you've seen the anime Laid Back Camp.
I love it.
Oh, I feel like if you're into a show or wanting something calming, it's so cute. It's just all about these high schoolers who have a club to go camping, and it's all about relaxing in nature and friendship and being nice to one another. It's so sweet. I highly recommend it if you're looking for a show to watch.
Laid Back Camp. I'm gonna have to look that up because I love cozy stuff, especially when you're stressed and you just want something that's gonna relax you.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like it would be aligned with what you would like, just from my vision of just what it is and what I've seen you create, which is what we're talking about today, which is Mr. Saitou. One of the things that we like to do is, because we spend a lot of time describing the game to folks in the community, we'd love to have you describe what Mr. Saitou is in your own words, just so we can hear directly from you.
Okay, so I'm not as practiced on this as the Rakuen description, so I'll try my best. So Mr. Saitou is about an average salaryman in Japan who has kind of an accident and winds up in the hospital. And when he's there, he meets this spunky kid who ends up taking him on an adventure in another world where everybody is a llama worm.
As it happens in adventures.
I feel like for the people who have not yet played the game and are listening in, I don't know how to describe a llama worm outside of the most adorable creature in 2D. How would you describe a llama worm?
So a llama worm started off in Rakuen as an NPC. My artist for Rakuen, Emi Toyonaga, actually towards the end of Rakuen's development, we had time to go back and kind of fill in the world a bit. So I was doing side quests, and she'd send me pitches for characters. And so one day she sent me this llama worm, which is kind of, I guess it's like a mix between a llama and a worm. And she just like set the sprite and she said, "This is Saito-san, and he's a salary man." And he's self-conscious about his stripes. And that was all. And I was like, "What? This is cool." So I tried to work that in, like in the little place in the game that he's at. But it's funny because even though he started off as just like an NPC who has a few lines in that game, when I started streaming on Twitch, we were messing around with like 3D animation, augmented reality stuff. Like, they'll come out
Hmm.
from under the desk and dance around.
Yeah.
Somehow, Saito-san, the llama worm, became our mascot. And all this lore and backstory about his life as a salaryman working at Saito Corp kind of like surfaced and turned into the game. So,
That's
yeah.
amazing. I love that. So this was really because in so many cases games are developed almost in this mini vacuum where
Hmm.
it's like the developers sit and they have the plans and they're like, okay, once it's ready, we'll announce it to the world. But it seems like your development process was a little bit more community oriented in terms of at least the lore.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was so fun because, like, I think Saito actually started because of all the Rakuen characters. He's probably the easiest to translate to 3D and like work with and
Mm.
everything because he's pretty simple. He's just like a, I don't know what's that shape, like a cylinder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so we were like, yeah, that would be good. But every time he would come out and hang out, I would ask him questions and kind of like things would sort of develop. And then, chat would start asking questions, like, why are you self-conscious about your stripes? What's your boss like? Like what's your favorite tie to wear? Just like random questions. And like
Oh,
one of
wow.
the questions I thought was so funny, they said, do llama worms have a six pack? And I was like, no, they have a one pack, just, just a single pack. But so through that, we ended up doing like games for Halloween for whatever reason. We do like a Halloween event where I would make like an interactive game with chat where they'd have to like find clues and solve puzzles to get pieces of this story about Saito-san and his work environment and everything. And then at the end we'd have this big musical number. So like through the two games we did and all the musical numbers, it was really great to be able to kind of put that in like a little time capsule
Oh,
in this game. And even one of my favorite parts is the big musical number at the end, a tea party.
yeah.
That was actually something that we put together for, so I'm a Twitch ambassador and we get like a week where we do front page stuff. So I wanted to do like a really fun, it coincided with the Rakuen anniversary. So I was like, oh, let's do a new song. And I watch a lot of freestyle rap on Twitch. And two of my favorite freestyle rap streamers contributed. Each of them did a verse for that. And
Wow.
so that turned into Tea Party. And I'm like, oh, if we could somehow fit this into Mr. Saito, that would be so cool. So it almost wasn't in it, but we were able to make it happen. So yeah,
Oh, I
so it was
love
fun.
that. Yeah, it's
That's
such
like
a
a dream come
community.
true.
Yeah, I love how again you real it's rare that you get to see, and I guess early access is a case in which development you can see that, but to have such community involvement in developing this like lore and backstory and the songs and for people to be so excited and care about this character so much before the game even happens is truly
Hmm.
special.
Thank you. Yeah, I was so thankful we were able to do something like that because it's just, like I said, it's like a time capsule. So we can go back and, oh, I remember that joke or that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was curious because in an interview, this was like a 2017 interview that I checked out. So this may be totally irrelevant now, but you had mentioned that eventually you'd love to make a game. I think this was right around when Rakuen released, and you said as the next game you'd love to make a game about a Ren Fair worker who like got really fed up and just sort of went wild after being fed up at their job. And I'm curious if this was sort of an evolution of that idea, or if that's still an idea you have in the back of your mind that took a step aside when Mr. Saito became a thing.
Yeah, that's something I still want to do someday. So it's funny because like I don't know if you folks feel the same about this, but I know for me, when I'm working on a project, it's really easy for me to get distracted and be
Mm.
like, once I get past first section, and when I have to start making a bunch of difficult decisions, then I'm like, oh, I have this other idea. And I promised myself with Rakuen that I wasn't going to jump from project to project. I was going to finish.
Mm.
And so my way of combating that, because I think it's such a common problem for like so many of my game dev
Mm.
friends, they have the
Yep.
same thing. So I would tell myself, okay, Laura, if you get an idea and you really like it, you can have one day to sit there with your notebook and just do whatever you want, write out ideas, draw things. And it was great because I would kind of get it out of my system. And at the same time, I'd usually run into some sort of issue where it's like, oh, I have to solve this problem. Okay, well, every idea has its, problems. But so that was one of those. And I just thought it would be really funny. I imagine like a bard and the turkey leg vendor and maybe this like lady who was like the queen of the fairies or something like that. And they would be the party and they'd be at a Ren fair that was getting, vandalized by teenagers or something like that. And then like the city was trying to shut them down and like all these different things that were upsetting them. And then they basically like go on a rampage where it's just like a side-scrolling beat 'em up. They have like I
Which
just wanted want you to like be bashing people with turkey legs. So
Oh, yes.
I love it because it's such a departure from both of the titles that you've made now. Like it's a great departure. Like I think finding the way to express that rage is really good.
so yeah, it is my way of doing the silly kind of wordplay, like no holds barred, like
That
no
was
rules, but then also because
incredible.
So
he's
good.
barred.
Yep.
So I had to sneak that into Rockwood a little, and then that ended up, becoming its own thing there. So
Hmm.
Incredible. It's like the opposite of scary hour. You have like creative hour where you just get to like do something you really are like, man, I'm really like pinging off this thing. I gotta get some time with it. I love that idea. It's like I hate the like you have to take your medicine or eat all your veggies before you can move forward. I like veggies. I like cookies a lot more than veggies. So that's whatever your anti cookie is. That's the thing. But yeah, like it's being explicit about intentionally taking time to
Hmm.
actively pursue something that you're interested in or that you're like feeling a spark towards. I love that idea. That's brilliant.
Thank you. Definitely helped to keep me on track. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and Mr. Saito was developed, I think, predominantly because it came out just this year, earlier this year. So that means just kind of working backwards. A lot of the development was during like a lockdown
Mm.
period where we're all just kind of in our homes. What was it like developing the game and like keeping focus on one thing, especially during that time?
So Mr. Saito was strange in that it came together so quickly. Um, so like I started working on it August 1st of 2021. Oh no, wait. August 1st of 2022. So it took about 6 months to
Wow.
make, which is wild because
That is
Rockman
so
took
fun.
4 years. And granted, I was working very like long hours on it, and I think, being that I could reuse a lot of assets from the
Hmm.
Mm.
original game, and it's a lot shorter, that definitely helped, but it was still very like very fast dev cycle. And so that was, I guess, yeah, was still during like pandemic time, and a lot of the development of the like lore and backstory and stuff was happening on stream during pandemic time.
Mm.
And I think like it helped a lot because I know during lockdown, I streamed a lot more.
Yeah.
And it
Mm.
was interesting because it would feel like you had gone out in a sense. Like,
Uh,
like when you're streaming, you
yeah.
almost feel like you go to another world and you're hanging out with everyone. And so I think that was incredibly helpful for like mental health and feelings of community and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But concerning the actual development time. It was interesting because like I was feeling really kind of like a low point. Like I had a lot of like health issues going on. And then we got COVID in 2022
Mm.
that like wiped me out for a while. And afterwards I'm just like, oh, I don't know. Like what if I'm just not creative anymore? What if I already, made something and I don't have that anymore? And I sort of realized that in order to like jump into a project again, I needed to not go at it with the mentality that I had to have all the answers. Because
Mm.
whenever I compose music, my favorite state to be in is one where I can hear it all. Like I'm like, okay, I know what I'm going to do for this instrument and this instrument, and it's all there for me. But I can't always be in that state. So with the game, I was like, well, I don't have all the answers, but that's okay. I can still get started. And so I really just forced myself to sit there with a pen and paper, and just write out ideas out, write character things, even if I was going to end up changing a lot of it later. I kind of helped
Mm.
something in my mind get rolling.
Mm.
Um, and then things just started happening, and it was really fun, I think. Yeah, it was a fun process. Lots of stress towards the end because there were so many moving pieces since we were also releasing Rakuen for Nintendo Switch, um,
Mhm.
and localizing the game in Japanese. So there was like a lot going on, and I don't recommend
Wow.
doing multiple releases at the same time, but
Yeah.
it was what it was.
Wow. So I guess speaking of the lore development, considering like the communal way that this all came about, uh, at what point did you connect it to like a real life salaryman? Like at what point was it like, oh, it's not just this llama worm. Like the
Mhm.
llama worm is connected to this like real life entity. When did that connection happen?
That's a great question because like he didn't start off as having like a lot of the NPCs in Rakuen, I didn't really think too much about the human counterparts.
Mhm.
Um, So I think that was kind of later. I think during the stream, I probably had some idea of what would human Saito be like.
Mm.
Um, and because their world is just so absurd. So you could take a lot of liberties with that, right? But then like I think probably I want to say 2021-ish time, I did start thinking a little more about like what their real life struggles would be.
Mm.
Because one of the Halloween events we did dealt a lot with like social anxiety and isolation and
Mhm.
overwork and stress and all that stuff. And so I think I started thinking of like analogs, real life analogs. And then, but it wasn't until actually working on the game that I really, put all that together. I called my dad up because my dad is not a salary man, but he's the Japanese parent, and he worked in business, for many years, and he worked with a lot of companies that had salary men, and
Mm.
has a lot of friends, and so I had him just tell me all about it. And I took like 3 pages of notes all about salaryman life and what it's like, the process of getting there, and what the companies are like, and the terms, and all this other stuff, and that helped inform that side a lot. Yeah.
Man, I think it's so cool that you also had your dad to draw from all of that experience.
Mm.
One thing that I find really interesting too, and I'm curious, is because a lot of the themes are about work-life balance, overwork, stress, what your personal value as a human sort of is and in relation to work, like how you navigate that. And especially as a streamer where a lot of your passion and your work are so intertwined, I'm curious if any of those reflections or thoughts kind of came through and interspersed with just how you think about your career and your work as a content creator who blends a lot of what I imagine is really fun for you, but also is your work.
Yeah, so basically, I try everything that I do, and the older I get, I think about this more. I it takes so much energy and time to put a big project together that
Hmm.
I usually want to have some like meaning or purpose behind it that puts something good out there. Like in the way I think of it is if it can move people in a positive direction somehow,
Mm.
like either, you know, catharsis, like if somebody's dealing with loss, like
Mm.
with Rakuen, and kind of perspective shift. Like I find that I am the most overwhelmed when I see how bad things are. If I'm just like, oh, this is getting me down. This, I'm seeing relatives going through these things, or there's fighting and stuff like that. But then if I really really try to look at the positive things, like um good interactions that I've had with people, or the chance to be a blessing to somebody else. Like my mom, she got really sick, she got shingles, and
Mm.
they didn't catch it in time. She was misdiagnosed 3 times, and it led to a really horrible case of post-herpetic neuralgia. And so we kind of took care of her for about 2 months. And that was so hard, seeing her like that, because she's one of those people that's she's got a really high tolerance for pain. Like
Mm.
I saw her get a rock embedded in her leg once when she fell over, and she was just like, "Ugh, yeah, gotta get this rock out," you know. Like she didn't even cry. Like so to see her in so much pain that she couldn't even sleep at night,
Mm.
like was so horrible. And but I think like during that time, like I'd have moments where it's just like, what's the point? All this stuff people have to go through when they get older and how short life is. But then, like, when I thought about it, I was like, it was beautiful getting to see my dad care for my mom because
Mm.
he worked a lot and wasn't at home that much. But to see him, make her oden and be so proud of it, like, "Oh, I made this for you. It's a very special, like,
Aw.
was
Cute.
so sweet.
Yeah.
And just knowing that, like, if I, put effort into it, just knowing that I could help her somehow because she raised me and she did all that, like that I could somehow be a blessing to her. Um, that really, it changed my perspective on a lot of things. And so I definitely tried to put that into Mr. Saito,
Mm.
the concept of like, which were the oldest people who were the happiest. And I thought about that. I was like, yeah, which people do I know who are like 70, 80, 90 even years old? Like my grandmother lived to be almost 100. And I was just like, yeah, the happiest ones were the ones who loved the most, the ones that would
Mm.
take care of other people and were, just making food and bringing it over when somebody was sick or spending time with folks. And I was like, I want to be like that.
Hmm.
Ugh.
So,
Yeah, one of my favorite lines in the whole game is, and this is jumping forward quite a bit, but the when Brandon says to Mr. Saito, like, "Thank you for helping me keep my promise." So, like,
Mhm.
helping someone do something that means a lot to them is really such a powerful thing, and it can be something like small, or it could be as big as going on an adventure and taking them to a crystal cavern. And I thought that was the message that really resonated with me because especially now we're in a time where it's very easy to focus in on, well, what can I do to take care of myself and help myself and like be better like just with myself. But so often it's like if we looked up and we actually helped other people, that's what can really help everyone, including ourselves.
hmm.
Yeah.
That's so true. Yeah.
I'd love to ask you about like that quality of human connection.
Hmm.
I think back to like pandemic and like for the first few months, my wife and I were in like a really privileged position, but it was like, oh my gosh, we get to take a break from our social calendars and like we have some time to recharge. And this is I can play the video games that have been on my list for all this time. And now coming so far after like immunization, it's like maybe I've protected my time a little bit too well. And it's like I'm starting to realize how much of that human connection I'm missing. And you, I think, kind of represented, if not that exact feeling, certainly something akin to it, between the office work party that was like at the restaurant
Hmm.
versus the very meaningful connection that we see Saito and Brandon have. And I was just wondering if you could speak a
Hmm.
little bit on like that quality of connection that seems to be resonating kind of throughout the story.
Mm-mm. Yeah, so like I think a lot about that because I've been in situations that were supposed to be social situations, but I would feel very lonely because I was
Hmm.
like, oh, yikes. Sorry about that, my phone. Yeah, like I would be in social situations that would feel very lonely because people weren't really connecting with each other. Like
Hmm.
the best example I can think of, I went to this like board game party and I was like, oh yeah, cool, we're gonna play games and stuff. And I just noticed there was a lot of people that were just talking at each other.
Mm.
Like,
Hmm.
I'm gonna tell you about my board game. These are the mechanics and blah 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 blah. And then the other person would be like, no, well, my board game, blah 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 blah. And they would just be talking at each other, sort of like how, kids just are thinking they want to hear their voice.
Yeah.
It was like that. And I was like noticing that people weren't stopping to listen to what the other person would have to say.
Mm.
Um, and so it felt very lonely because I didn't feel like anybody was like listening to each other or understanding each other. And I'll notice that too, like in an age where we have so much technology that allows us to connect with people like all over the world so easily, anytime, day or night, that there's still so much loneliness out there. And I feel like there's even though we have bigger reach, we have smaller, opportunities for connection. And so I think about that a lot. Even when I go back to Japan, I think there's a lot of like social etiquette about that. Like, you know how in the West, you could just strike up conversation with people more easily.
Mhm.
In Japan, on the subway, a lot of times you just don't do that as much. And I have one memory where there was a salaryman, and he looked very, very, like the prototypical salaryman, but he had this tie that I don't even remember what was on it, but it was really flashy tie. And so I told him that his tie was cool. And I was with my aunt. She was like, Laura, what are you saying to people? I was like, oh, what? And I could tell he was happy. He was smiling. He looked like obviously he put that tie on for a reason. He was trying to express himself. But it was funny because I learned, yeah, okay, yeah, it's not considered appropriate all the time to do that.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think that one thing that I try to do, and one thing I try to, I guess, impart to other people, especially like I always have a soft spot for introverts. I grew up in an area that was, very academic, lots of introverts, lots of focus on that, but not as much interaction. Um, I like to just teach people, like, if you're having trouble reaching out to folks, ask get good at asking questions,
Mm.
get good at being curious about other people, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to feel loved and acknowledged and interesting, and like the best way to make friends is just, learn about them, ask them about their life, about what they're interested in, and like have that connection, and then that opens it up and you can have this flow with another person. And yeah, I think it's so important, and something that's kind of going down in society these days. So I'm really hoping that we can have more of that.
Love.
Yeah, that's really really wonderful. And I think I loved how that's exactly what Brandon does for Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Saitou, where
Mm-hmm.
you see, Mr. Saitou is so um struck by needing to stay within this box of conventions, and just like it's so like I even remember reading the dialogue where Mr. Saito's like, I'm on a diet. I can't eat a snack before this adventure. And it's like, this doesn't like this doesn't even make sense. And so the way that you have the two characters really juxtapose one another is so much fun, because you have Mr. Saito, who represents that conventionality, and then
Mm-hmm.
Brandon, who does represent that curiosity and just joy for wanting to know more about life. I'm curious if either of those characters had real people that you drew from, or specific, especially Brandon, because we've talked a little bit more about Saito-san and how, the origin story of the llama worm, but Brandon in particular is such a wonderful character,
Yeah.
and I'd love to hear more about how you came up with Brandon.
So this one's kind of funny because Brandon initially was inspired by a kid named Brandon that we met at a card shop, like in Magic the Gathering card shop.
Oh.
I think he was around 9 years old, 10, something like that. And he was so funny. Like he was just one of those like precocious kids that you could tell probably like spent a lot of time with grown-ups and like was very comfortable around adults. And
Mhm.
he just like walked up to our table like, "Hey, you guys want some mini tacos?" And he
Yes. Yes, please.
Oh my gosh.
and he would just show up at random places to give us little tips about things. Like he's just like, I'm doing this Zelda D&D thing, on Tuesdays if you guys want to come by. Like, and he told us about like the drink machines. He's like, these are kind of a ripoff. If you want to save money, the fountain drinks are the way to go. So he was such a character, and he was also really pleasant. Like he didn't his two-headed giant partner, like the format where you play 2-on-2 and everything, like he
Mhm.
um was a grown-up, just some person that he met at the card shop. And he was such a good sport. Like
Mm.
if he lost, he didn't get upset. He wasn't, trying to win above all else. He just seemed like the kind of kid that wanted everyone to have a good time. And I was like, dude, this kid is so funny and like pleasant.
I love that Brandon actually exists, because I remember
It's
like it's just Brandon. You read Brandon and you're just like, this kid is amazing in the game. Like in the game, could this kid exist? And I love that there is a Brandon out there in the world.
There is a Brandon out there. Have hope.
Yeah. I also think too, like, I always say that the game is kind of like a love letter to both introverts and also to my community.
Hmm.
And there's like times in my life where I went to Japan and did like a kind of a big family trip where I visited all my relatives. And I have one aunt who's so funny. She's one of those people that's just very like gruff on the outside, like, oh, I hate everything. Oh, like that. And but it was fun to kind of not tease her, but like, just hang out with her and
Mm.
be like, what are you gonna do? She loved baking. And I was just like, what are you gonna bake? What are you gonna make? And she's like, oh, you're such a nuisance, like here, eat your cake. And I could, like I think some people see that and go, "Oh, she might be kind of harsh," but I'm like, "No, she's a nice person." You could tell. And so when it's time to go back home again, I was staying with a different relative, and they were the ones bringing me to the airport. And she apparently called and was like, "Well, I want to go to the airport too." And they're like, "What? But you're like 2 hours away. Are you sure?" And so then she got there, and I was like, "Oh, she wanted to come." Like, and so when she showed up there, I was like, "Oh, you came," and she was like, "I just needed to make sure you were leaving." Like, okay.
That's so cute.
So I just think about, that dynamic that just like you know, adults can provide for kids. I think there's
Hmm.
something
Mm.
refreshing too that the younger perspective can provide um, to adults. And I was an adult at that time, but my Japanese is so like kid-like because that's when I learned to speak was when I was a kid. And so I have a theory that when my relatives speak to me, they feel like they're speaking to a kid because of that. So maybe it's a little
I
disarming.
feel the same with my Korean, so I feel, yeah, I connect to that on a core level.
Yeah. Uh, but yeah, so I thought about those kinds of interactions or um, things like that where there's somebody who's a little bit more like, let me try to bring you out of your shell,
Mm.
Hmm.
and make you feel comfortable and ask you questions and stuff like that. So yeah.
One thing that really strikes me, I think about your work, in hearing you describe this also it just has become more clear, is this connection between younger generations and older
Mhm.
generations, because that's not something we often see, especially in games.
Mm.
And I was curious if this is intentional or if you're really trying to show like that connection, not simply across peers, but also in wanting to make sure we like learn from older generations and respect them. I think like the segment with is it Auntie Onion, I
Oh
think?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's like
Yeah.
a whole
Yeah.
segment of like, you have this moment with an elder at the campfire, and it didn't feel like the typical moments in video games where it's like the wizened elder sage. There's like that
Mhm.
tropish kind of
Mhm.
elder that we
Mhm.
see, but um yeah, I'm just curious about if you have that as an intention about, connecting with elders, not simply just connecting with general other people.
Definitely. And thank you for asking that because like I think that you're right. Like it seems that in the West there's less focus on that and in Eastern cultures there's more respect for elders and stuff like that. And I think like I see a lot of kind of blanket assumptions about older generations sometimes, complaining about things. And it really makes me sad, that there's such big generalizations about an entire generation of people. Like they're all people and they all have their own personality and life experiences. And a lot of them have been through a lot and, have things that they can teach us.
Mm.
There's a lot of like grandmothers out there who, they went through motherhood and had all these children and went through rough times and just stuck it up, kept it together
Yeah.
for their kids and like they have interesting stories to tell. Like I used in college, I used to ride the bus and like if I saw like an old lady, I would try to this is weird to say, but I would try to go sit next to her and see if I could talk to her.
Oh.
Because a lot of
Oh.
times I notice that and my mom's kind of like this too, like where they want to talk, but they're usually the ones that don't get to talk because they're
Mm.
always listening to everybody else.
Mhm.
And so they would always have really fun things to say or stories or advice. And so to me, that was always really special. And so, yeah, I did want to kind of show like that you can learn from those sorts of things and that it is kind of like a great relationship where both people can, get something positive out of it and help each other at the same time. And yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, I so relate to that. I feel like I am starving for that a little bit, like that connection with older
Mm,
generations right now. We
mhm,
moved across country, so it's like it's just difficult to meet people that are that far outside of your like direct like age range.
mhm.
But I also love that you're referencing how like the elders can also learn from the kids. Like the first scene that we have with Brandon is him like essentially tricking Saito into playing hide and go seek in this hospital, and it's like, when's the last time I played hide and go seek? When's the last time I like sprinted for no reason as fast as I could? Like
Yeah.
it's like there's those small moments from like childishness that it's like, wow, like
Mhm.
those are moments of like real joy a lot of times. And I just love as soon as we meet Brandon, he starts kind of teaching Saito about that part of life again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Because I feel like the thing I miss the most with, childhood is that sense of wonder. And
Hmm.
I
Mhm.
find that it's hard to get that, the older you get or and so I look for it wherever I can. I still get it with like animals, like
Yeah.
if you see like a really cute dog or like, um or like nature a lot of
Mhm.
times
Hmm.
too. Um and there's certain movies, like I recently watched Mary and the Witch's Flower.
Oh,
Since yeah, I
Yes. Oh
haven't
my
seen it. I didn't even realize I was so behind on the latest, Ghibli films. I was like, oh, there's one I missed. And just, like flying above the clouds and going to another world. And
god. Mhm.
I try to find, to think about that, like that feeling of wonderment. And when you see kids and they're just like so able to just like conjure stuff up. Like I remember the only thing that could, pull me away willingly from video games was the chance to go play in the backyard with my siblings and our friends.
mm,
And I
Mhm.
didn't even know what we did. We just made stuff up for hours. Like, oh, we're on this island and, there's, people that are coming invading and oh no, she's sick. We got to climb to the top of this tree and get medicine. And, we just make stuff up and it was so fun and we didn't want to come inside. And I wish that I could still have that because, yeah. So,
I guess
um,
that's what Dungeons and Dragons is for me at this
Yeah.
point. Like that's my proxy for that is like, well, let's just like sit down and tell a shared story together, and but with harder rules and dice.
Let's just make it more complicated
Let's
because
make
we're
it more
grown up.
complicated.
definitely.
That's
Oh my
Have you
exactly
gosh.
it.
played D&D for a while or?
And we don't play on the same campaign. I think you're more experienced than I am. I'm pretty fresh to D&D, but I very much enjoy it. I like doing, and it's funny because I don't actually like the traditional D&D where it's like let's focus on the combat and the stats. I'm like let's play like Redwall Feast and let's
Yes.
pretend like
Yes.
we're just in a lovely countryside and let's just pretend that.
Is Redwall the mice, the one about the
Yes.
mice?
Yep.
I only watched that during pandemic, and I was like, "What is this? This is so awesome!"
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's so great. It's like all the food. It's just such a cozy, comforting sort of series and world. I love it so much.
Oh man.
I think what I find really exciting about your work is that it does remind us of that joy and wonder, and
Hmm.
it does allow us, especially as adults who don't often get to flex the muscle of being creative and fantastical and putting ourselves in these really imaginary worlds. What's really exciting is that you do allow us through your games to flex that muscle and to say like, oh, let's imagine we're llama worms in an office where minimori exist, and like
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
allows people to practice joy, because I think what's really interesting is nowadays it's so easy that we're flexing the muscle of being upset about things or being enraged about what's going on. And I mean, we should to a certain extent, but there's only so much until we are just like in this rabbit hole
Hmm.
spiraling and being angry for with no purpose. And so having the opportunity to flex joy and to flex uh, just being happy and wondrous is really exciting.
That's so good. Flexing joy.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm curious too because while your games are really, and especially Mr. Saito, I feel like it's so funny. There are so many
It's
jokes.
very funny.
I laugh so much
I was
during
on the
the
airplane this week playing through it, and I was just like cracking up, and I'm sure the people next to me were like, "What is going on with this guy?"
Yeah, but it's so funny. But then you are able to really swiftly navigate into these really vulnerable moments. And I'm curious what it's like to write for that, as you're balancing this wild sense of humor and then you get into these sentimental points in time.
Thank you, first of all, for saying that. Because, like I said before, I am always surprised when people do get my sense of humor, or when they're able to resonate with the characters or stories. Because, like, when I write, I totally go up in my head, and I'm always like, is anyone gonna get this? Um, like with Rakuen, for example, the Monsieur Bud tea section, I actually wrote all that when I was. I'm making it sound like I play Magic all the time, and I don't play that much these days. But like I was in a Magic store, Magic the Gathering store, and I wasn't. Yeah, there were other people playing a tournament, but I just brought my laptop and I was, writing the dialogue, and I was just sitting there cracking myself up because I was being so stupid. I was like, "Oh, look at you put graffiti of a butt on the wall," and I like emailed my artist, and I was like, "Emmy, can you draw like maybe Monsieur Bud pooping, And then she was just like, yes. It's just stuff like that where I feel like, when a kid is being stupid and just like making themselves laugh, that's what it feels like when I'm writing those scenes.
Mhm.
Um, and I have to be in a really particular mood because I can't go into writing dialogue if I'm not feeling that mood, because then it's like insincere. And so I really, for dialogue, I really wait until I'm in the right state.
Mhm.
Um, Same with like the like the more serious scenes or the sad scenes. Like the end of Rock One was so difficult writing both the music and the dialogue because, well, it's quite a few things in a row.
Mhm.
Not to mention recording the part where the track called Mom Broken,
Mhm.
where she starts singing and then her voice, kind of gives out a little bit.
Yeah.
Like that week, I was so emotional.
Oh.
I was just like a wreck. I remember my roommates at the time were just like, Laura, what's wrong with you? Because I'd come out from my room, I'd be like, you know,
Oh no.
it was really hard writing it. But at the same time, I feel like getting in that state produces the most like realistic or genuine um, dialogue or music, likewise, like sometimes with the Crystal Cavern scene in Mr. Saito, I really wanted that scene to feel a particular way, like a sense of like wonderment and also a sense of like, connection and bigger picture, like there's a lot of feelings I was
Mhm.
trying to capture. And so working on that track, the Gemstone Caverns track for it, it was very important for me to get it right,
Mhm.
So once I had that track down, it really helped me write the dialogue because I spent a lot of time working on that, and I was like, nope, this sounds contrived. Nope, that's not right, and I rewrote it so many times. And once I had the music finished, then it was like first try. Like it just really helped to have that, um, I guess, peripheral thing to get you in that state.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, a lot
Well,
of music, dialogue, interaction type stuff, and a lot of trying to get in the right state of mind.
Yeah. Did you find with most of your work you did have to have the music first to be able to ground like what you wanted that conversation and mood to be?
Um, not with every part, because a lot of tracks I ended up having to write afterwards, but I would say that it really helps me to have like I know there's probably a term for this, like with game design, like how you make a design doc or you have like a cornerstone thing. But it would help me to have a track that was kind of like the thing I would go back to.
Mm.
So for Mr. Saito, that was the Goodbye Mr. Saito track. It was the first music I wrote specifically for the game. And whenever I got stuck creatively, I would just listen to it, and it would make me think, oh, this is what he's like, this is what his life is like. And um, it would just help a lot. Like with Rock when I had Jump before I had anything else, and it would center me around that. So,
That's so
yeah.
cool.
those peripherals as a conduit, I think that's such a
Mhm.
powerful idea. And I think you also really put that on display in Saito. And I think you were kind of talking about this a second ago. the idea that I am this salaryman, and now I am not that. I am this, fantastical creature. For it, for those of us who are stuck in the corporate world still, there's something about being able to play through as someone that is not human that I
Mhm.
think does allow for that sense of play, and maybe a similar way to how, like, when you have the peripherals of music, it lets you access those other feelings and emotions to engage in a more authentic way as well.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
I wonder because it's kind of like, have you ever heard, even in sort of therapy, for example, where it's easier for kids, for example, to use a doll to like speak their feelings or to like feel their emotions? Is it, I wonder if
Brilliant.
it's kind of like that, where it's, if we can't talk about, maybe the struggles we're feeling as human beings in work and life and value as humans, but maybe as llama worms, it feels a little bit safer for us to talk about these hard topics.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That makes me so happy that you like yeah, yeah, because actually with Rakuen, when people ask like what are the stories? And a lot of times, well, I say that people could have, many different interpretations of like what happened, what it all means. For me personally, I like to think of what's happening as mom kind of talking with people, understanding the kind of grown perspective of what's
Hmm.
happening, and then somehow relaying that to boy in a way that's easier for him to understand as a kid who's like 7 or 8 years old. Why is Tony a bear, for example?
Hmm.
Like, why are they getting mad at each other? Kind of like telling about things through these worlds and childlike stories to put kind of grown up serious concepts into something that a kid can understand. Even what he's going through personally, is her way of helping him understand what's happening and helping him look at it in a more beautiful and meaningful, purposeful way. Um, and so I really like what you said about, sometimes it's easier, for like kids to talk to like a little toy or puppet or something like that. I think a lot of Rakuen World and Mr. Saito, there are a lot of those concepts which come across through silly, kind of kiddish, goofy fantasy settings. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. Can I know that we're running a little bit short on time, but we haven't talked about the art style of your game at
Oh,
all, really.
yeah.
And I bet I took like 100 screenshots as I was playing through the game. And when you get to the Crystal Cavern, I bet
Oh my
probably
gosh,
30
yeah.
of them or 40 of them came from just like that entire sequence. I'm just wondering what the process was like, or the motive, maybe the inputs that informed some of the design or art style for this game. If there's anything you'd like to speak to there.
Yeah, so I think I really loved have you guys ever played Legend of Mana before?
Yes.
Great game. Ugh.
So good.
I absolutely loved that art style because I think it was at a time when consoles were trying to go like all full 3D, and so it was interesting to see a game that was sticking with that kind of like painted look, um, and they did such a beautiful job, and just like the talking rock guy or the tree. And I was like, this is amazing. It's so beautiful. And like, if look it up today, it still kind of holds,
Mhm.
like it aged very well,
Hmm.
And so I think those kinds of old styles, I really wanted to have a lot of that in the game. Working with people like Emmy and Steven, did a fantastic job. And I think everybody that I work with, I think we all really want to, do what we do to like the best level that we can, so
Mhm.
instead of like let's have a parallax, let's have a 14 layer parallax, you know what I mean? Like, and so I feel like that showed a lot, because it's just like when you're really curious and passionate about what your style is, what your forte is, it's cool to see what comes of it. But yeah, lots of kind of old school elements and inspirations, and lots of looking at amethyst. crystals for
Oh,
them.
cool.
Yep.
Ugh.
Uh,
Yeah, I gotta say, like, and just the change from the very like dour and sallow real world at the beginning, which I'm a little bit emotionally dysregulated right now, but like, I'm like sitting on the plane playing the intro of this game and just like borderline weeping as I'm like watching this salary man on the subway and like his shadow in the background. And I was just like, oh boy, what am I in for? And then again, it was like I got to flex the joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna steal that. That's so good. When we go to this fantastical world and like the palette changes and the feeling and vibe changes, it all came together so well between the music and the imagery and then the writing. I can't imagine a more like transportative experience.
Thank you so much. I remember being a little concerned when releasing the game because this wasn't supposed to be another Rakuen. You know, it was a shorter project and
Mhm.
a lot sillier. And I was really afraid that people were going to go into it expecting that same experience.
Mm.
And so I was really happy when people could play it for what it is, you know,
Mhm.
um, and get that kind of slice of life sort of adventure, that little, yeah, transformative slice of life kind of thing. But yeah.
Yay. I guess as a final question, because in the trailer and in the game itself, there's a lot of discussion of a life well lived.
Mm.
And so, just to kind of start winding us down and closing us out, I was curious what you, and you alluded a little bit to this, but what would you say is a life well lived for you?
Hmm. This is, yeah, how to state this simply. I think when we're young, the world revolves around us in our heads, you know, and like for kids, you know, even when you're in high school, it's like a lot of people, you know, it's just kind of like, oh, I want approval or attention or, you know, stuff like that. And then as you get older, I think people start, you know, when they emotionally mature, they realize, well, everybody is out there wanting the same thing, you know, everybody's kind of struggling, you know, to protect their ego, to like feel acceptance, to
Mm.
stuff like that. And you start moving towards that. And I think like you get to a point too where I think people kind of fight a lot, you know, and take sides, us versus them, stuff like that. And then you look at like the even older, like the people that get to the end of their life and they're so over it. They're just like, we're all gonna die. You know, we're all human. We're all just like they're just like is everyone fighting so much, you know?
Mm.
And I think like to get to the realization that we're all in this together and that I think we as humans have more in common than we have different. And that I personally think that when I'm being a blessing to other people somehow, it like not only pulls me out of my own neuroticism, you know, or things that
Mm.
I'm worried about because I'm so focused on that, but it's so edifying and it's I think the way we're supposed to be, you know, like the more that everybody can live for someone else, you know, the more that they can be a light for somebody else. I think that that's a life well lived. And if I get to the end of my life and I can say, okay, you know, I created a lot of things and tried to help people and, you know, tried to overcome my own inner demons and stuff like that, then I'll be happy. Yeah.
I need to. I guess this is recorded. I was like, I should just record this, and I was like, wait,
We're doing
we are
that.
recording this. I was like, this is so beautiful.
Uh,
Thank you for sharing that. It's one of those things that when I think in the back of our minds we know this, but to hear you say it just really allows it to hit home. So thank you for sharing that. Just to finish us off, I'm curious, where can folks find you if they're wanting to follow more of your creative work, if they find a lot of joy in what you do and they want to keep track of what you're up to next?
Thank you. I'm Super Shiggy on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. So just super like Superman and then Shiggy, Shigi. And if anyone wants to check out either Rakuen or Mr. Saito, they're both available on Steam and Nintendo Switch. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to chat with us, for sharing just all of the knowledge. Really appreciate it. We are very big fans of your work over
yes.
here.
Thank you for having me on the show. You're both super easy to talk to and made it absolutely comfortable. I was super tired today because foolishly stayed up till like 3 in the morning, and I was like, oh no, what if what if I don't have the energy to talk? But then you guys made it so comfortable, so thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you so much for joining us today on Geeks and Grounds. We got to talk with Laura about Mr. Saitou. Hopefully you had a great time listening.
I had a great time. I feel like I'm ready to flex some joy, you know?
We're gonna do lots of heavy reps, or like few reps of heavy joy. That's gonna be the workout plan.
Right, the compressive overload of joy. So we can handle more joy.
Yeah, tear the joy muscle to rebuild the joy muscle. And I'm probably going to be like, this week's probably like 8 reps of like 150 joys. That's what I'm going to be.
Yeah, 150 joys sounds really good. Yeah, avoid the metrics, stick with the joys, and I think we got a great plan.
Don't lift pounds, lift joys.
And again, if you're looking for more Geeks and Grounds info, content, all the details, you can go to geeksandgrounds.com. That's where you sign up for the newsletter that gets sent out every Tuesday with more details about the game we're playing that month. And that's where you can find our social channels and basically everything you need to know.
Everything you need to know. Where can people find you, Jenny?
Folks can find me at Kimchica on Twitch, TikTok, and YouTube. What about you, Joel?
You can find me at My Grand Falloon at all the socials.
Awesome. And with that,
instead of lifting your coffee this week, lift joy.
I like that.
Unless joy is coffee for you, in which case lift both.
Yeah.
That's wow.
Heavy lifting. I love it.
Yeah.
See y'all next time.